We're going to start off now with our top 5 underrated lists. So we have a couple of
Let's go.
Very excited over there. It's a very good list, a very what's the word? A lot of anticipation for this list here. So you're going to get each of our top 5 underrated lists. We'll go 5, 5, 5, all that stuff. I think we're going to have a couple of different teams, but I am very interested to see the other guys' list here today. So we're going to start off with the underrated list and then the overrated list in the next video for you guys that are watching this solo. So we're going to go Kev, Mitch, and then myself. So number 5, Kev, your 5th most underrated team in the NFL in 2019.
Okay, so before we get into this, it's not like I'm anticipating that these teams are going to be Super Bowl champions, or my overrated list is a bunch of they're going to be duds. And what are you guys thinking? I just think that people are not giving them the credit where they are. Is kind of what I'm saying here. So my number 5 team is underrated right now is the Seattle Seahawks. And I know that that may come a little bit as a homer, but I think they did very well in the Frank Clark trade. I think DK Metcalf is going to have a very good year in Seattle. They were averaging 30 points a game in the second half of the season. So that offense can score points. They will need to be more creative than people think. And I think that the NFL has typically slept on the Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson, and they haven't necessarily given him the credit overall that they have deserved. So I have number 5, the Seattle Seahawks. Again, I'm not saying the Seattle Seahawks are a Super Bowl contender. I just think that I think the league underrates the Seattle Seahawks.
That's a fair pick. Even though I'm down on the Seahawks this year, that's a fair pick.
That is a fair pick. I do not have them on either of my lists, so, all for it. I do like that. Mitch, number 5.
All right, my number 5 is the Minnesota Vikings. And guys, before I get into my list, I have another list that I'm going to come out with, which is the top 5 dark horse teams. So there's going to be a little bit of difference between my list and Dylan and Kevil's list, because my dark horse teams are teams that I feel like could potentially even go to the Super Bowl as playoff teams, but they're not really getting the credit as playoff contenders. My underrated list is like Kevil's, where it's like, okay, I don't know if this team's going to make the playoffs or not, but they're being significantly slept on as a team that could make the playoffs and could even have some damage in the playoffs. So the Minnesota Vikings, number 5. The Vikings are underrated because, first off, nobody is talking about them, and they're an extremely talented roster. You look at their offense, Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, and an offensive line that I think is arguably better than last year, at least on paper, by adding a center in the first round with Bradbury. Kyle Rudolph at tight end, Irv Smith at tight end as well. So you kind of have an extra option there where they really struggled with the third receiver. You add Irv Smith Jr. in there to hopefully help at the tight end position. And as long as Kirk Cousins can get some protection, I think their offense will be great, and I think Dalvin Cook should have a huge season, as I brought up before. And if their defense, can just play a little bit better than last year, they should be a team that's around 9 to 10 wins this year. They're in a very competitive division, which hurts kind of their prospect of being a very good team. But overall, you look at their roster, and they're one of the more talented rosters from top to bottom in the NFL, and that's why they're underrated, because nobody's really talking about them as a team that's going to the playoffs.
All right, interesting. I've heard you build up the Vikings as of late, so I definitely can understand why you got them on the list, and there are some good reasons. I like those reasons for sure. They're not on my list. I'm just going to let everybody know that, but I like that number 5. Okay, my number 5 team here for the underrated list is the Buffalo Bills. This is a team in a very stacked division. Of course, there are a lot of things that are hindering them from making the playoffs. But I feel like this could be a team that could sneak in that wild card, that second wild card spot, the coveted second wild card spot that always takes until the final week of the regular season to get. And I think the Bills did a great job in the offseason and free agency to build themselves a pretty good unit for Josh Allen to get to. Of course, I'm not the biggest fan of Josh Allen, but I think he did do pretty solid, all things considered, with the Bills team he was given last year. They went 6-7 in the 13 starts that he had, and that team was not very talented. So I think they made a lot of progression to getting better in terms of the 2019 season. You had Ed Oliver helping out that defense. And I think their defense is one of the most underrated in the NFL if we're just strictly talking about one side of the football. Their receivers are not the greatest. I think it's probably the worst core you have in the AFC East, but still, I think there are enough okay receivers that if Josh Allen needs to move around and do something, he'll be able to do something. I think they have a team overall that is going to be very, slept on because they are the Buffalo Bills. They are, they had this stigma against them. And I think they can do some damage if they get in that wild card number 2 in 2019. So I have them here at number 5. Kevo, your number 4 team on the underrated list.
Excuse me. My number 4 team that is underrated is the Detroit Lions. That is right. I said the Detroit Lions. Again, this is not necessarily a team that is I'm not predicting playoffs, but if you look at their offense, it's, they got CJ Anderson, they got Kerryon Johnson. Their offensive line, I think, is pretty good. I have questions about their defense. Stafford didn't have the greatest of years last year, but he's a pretty good quarterback. The question will always be what Matt Patricia can do. But I think the Detroit Lions are an underrated team. I think offensively, I think they do have a dynamic offense that can score some points. And I think that people are sleeping on them a little bit. So I have the Detroit Lions.
Those Detroit Lions. There's 2 NFC North teams right there from you guys. Mitch, number 4, what you got?
At number 4, I've spoke about them before, the Buffalo Bills, same as Dilly Vanilli. They're my currently second place team in the AFC East. And when you look at their roster, I think they've improved in some of the key areas where they were very weak last year. Starting with the offensive line, they've added a couple new starters to the offensive line with some big draft picks like Cody Ford. They added one of the best centers in the league with Mitch Morse. They added to their wide receiver core, which was the worst in the NFL last year with John Brown and Cole Beasley, 2 guys that I think fit their scheme very well. They added one of the best returners in the league with Andre Roberts. They have Frank Gore to back up LaShawn McCoy. I think Josh Allen's going to take a huge step up. Their defense was already second place in the NFL last year, and they added Ed Oliver. And I just think overall their defense is extremely underrated, especially their secondary, which was first against the pass last year. They have a very promising head coach, Sean McDermott, and I do like their offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll, as the biased Patriots fan. He came from the Patriots. So I think that the Bills, in a AFC East that is kind of unknown behind the Patriots, they're going to take a big step forward, and I think going to be a team that's going to be very difficult to play.
I like it. The Bills at number 4 for Mitch's side of things. Bodo said that his number 4 is the Niners, and I agree because my number 4 is the 49ers. Now, okay, I know Mitch, specifically if you watch this channel, you wouldn't think they're underrated because Mitch hypes them up. Nobody's business.
I just made a video about how they're contenders for the Super Bowl, so yeah, go ahead.
So there you go. Even better. Go check out those videos. I have been watching them this week. They're very good. The thing about the 49ers is that we all think the Rams. When we think about that NFC West, it's all about the Rams. What are the Rams going to do? How is the Rams offense going to come back from the Super Bowl? But we got to look at the 49ers. Last year, Jimmy G got hurt very early on in the season, so we didn't get to see the full potential of the 49ers. And their offense still did a pretty decent job, especially in the second half of the year. George Kittle went off. Had one of the best tight end seasons in recent history. You still got, good receiver talent. It's got to get a little better, but they did draft Deebo Samuel in the second round, so that's good. We're going to get to see finally if Jimmy G pays off. And then their defense. I think they got a really stacked defense. Obviously, they drafted Nick Bosa with the second pick. I think he's going to do very good. They got Dee Ford here. Richard Sherman, we'll see, another good season with him. I think a lot of good solid talent that is here. Also, Quan Alexander, really good at the linebacker position. So I think the 49ers just don't get that hype from the media. We're talking about the Rams and such. But we're not talking about the 49ers. We're not focusing on them. And I think they have a pretty decent chance to win their division. I'm just going to say that right now. So number 4 for me is the 49ers. Kev, what do you have here at number 3 for me?
Number 3, I have the Denver Broncos. I didn't like the Joe Flacco trade in and of itself because it felt like to me that they were getting the same type of quarterback that they've been dealing with for ever since John Elway retired. But when you look at what they've done overall with their draft the last few years, and you combine that, I think that they're a better team than I think people are giving them credit for. I think their offense is a bit better than they are. I think getting Vic Fangio as their head coach, I think is a good get. I think that their defense will respond to them. And I remember, I know, like, you look at last year in that last game against Oakland, that team that really tried to get Vance Joseph fired for the last couple of years. Yeah. I just think that they're a better team than people are giving them credit for. And when we, so I'm going, I have the Denver Broncos as number 3.
All right.
I'm not saying they're a playoff team, but I do think that people are kind of sleeping on them a little bit.
I was very shocked to see that on the list, so good job. They're underrated in some ways.
I actually like that pick, Kevin, because I almost put them number 5. So I do like that pick. I do think the one thing that he said, Vance Joseph, nobody, he was a terrible coach. Like, he was arguably the worst coach in football. So if Vic Fangio is anywhere near the middle coaches in football, they're just going to be a couple wins better just because of that alone. So, and not to mention, I think they got better in terms of their talent. So that's a good pick. At number 3 for me, the Tennessee Titans. The Titans are a team that I've said it many times. I'll say it again. I don't like their quarterback. He was I think he was number 3 on my top 10 overrated players in the NFL. But outside of their quarterback, I think they arguably have the best roster in that division in the AFC South. When you look at it, they really improved their offense. I mean, they drafted A.J. Brown at receiver. They brought in a super underrated slot receiver in Adam Humphries, who I think is going to have a big season. They already have Corey Davis. They have a decent offensive line that added Roger Saffold, who's one of the top 10 guards in the NFL. Delaney Walker is coming back. They already have a good duo at running back. And I think a really underrated ad for them was getting Ryan Tannehill as a backup quarterback, because they have lost many games where Marcus Mariota has been injured late in the season and they have not had a backup. So by adding Ryan Tannehill, he's just as good, if not better, than Marcus Mariota. So I think that's a good ad there. Defensively, I mean, they were already solid with a super underrated core. They added Cameron Wake as a pass rusher, which they kind of missed last year in terms of the pass rush. They have a really solid secondary. Mike Vrabel's a promising young head coach. And I like the Titans. I think they could make the playoffs this year.
Interesting. The Titans like at number 3. I did not expect that either. So, all right. Solid number 3 there. Kevo, I'm going to revert back to your list because at number 3, I had the Detroit Lions. Yes, call me a hypocrite for absolutely making fun of last year's comments about our preview with the Lions, but that was a different team. You know what I'm saying? This year, I think they've got a lot of really solid talent that I think could, there you go, there's that word, solid, that I think could really help this team go forward. And they made a lot of big splashes in the offseason. First off, they drafted a tight end at the number 8 pick, TJ Hawkinson, who a lot of people are very high on. I'm still wanting to see what it comes down to here in the NFL, but I think he can be a really, really good tight end in this league. And another target for Matthew Stafford. That's always a big positive, who I think did take a step down last year, but if there is a bounce back year, this could be the year. Defensively, obviously, they made a lot of big acquisitions. They got Trey Flowers, who we know in his time in New England did a very good job there. And I think having him here with Matt Patricia is going to be all the better for their team. Of course, they got Snacks Harrison. Who doesn't like a good little bit of Snacks Harrison? Darius Slay still there. They got Quandary Diggs. They got Justin Coleman, who I did put in the offseason as one of the more overrated signings. I did not like that signing in particular. But if there's anybody that's going to have to prove themselves here, it's Justin Coleman for the Lions. And I think he can provide a role for them. So I think their defense is very stacked. I think there's a lot of great players there. And their offense, if it gets better and everybody's healthy, I think can be a team that we need to look at a little bit more coming in 2019. So number 3, Detroit Lions. All right, Kev.
I think you're underrating Justin Coleman, by the way. I think he's a better player than you think.
I didn't like the signing based on his money. I think it was just too much.
Yeah.
I think the fact that he's played for Matt Patricia before was a big reason why they gave him that money.
It was probably a good reason. I think obviously he sees the potential in him. I need to see him fit in the scheme in order to be like, all right, Justin Coleman, you proved me wrong. You know, that's just how I feel.
All right,
Kev, number 2.
Number 2 is probably going to be a surprise to a lot of people, considering the way that I have talked about this team before, and I've specifically talked about their quarterback before. But I have the Pittsburgh Steelers as number 2 on my underrated list. I think that we're going to get to an overrated team that I think is getting far too much, maybe getting a lot of attention, and this team is falling a lot under the radar. I think Jalen Samuels is going to have a really good year. I think like James Conner, maybe James Conner, but I think Jalen Samuels is going to have a really good year. I think it's an arguable point that you can make that the offensive line for the Steelers is one of the better ones in the AFC or the NFL. And I think their defense has taken a good step. I think TJ Watt will be better this year. Devin Bush is a good acquisition. Their linebackers are good. Secondary will always be a little bit of a question, but I think getting Le'Veon Bell out of there, getting Antonio Brown out of there, I think that there's going to be a huge weight lifted off this Steelers' shoulders. And I think that they're going to be a lot better than people think this year. So I have the Pittsburgh Steelers, yes, at number 2.
All right, fair. This is weird for me, just knowing that all the talk you have with the Steelers, but I see the reasoning. I definitely agree with some of the reasoning there. All right.
I would have placed the Steelers on this list if they weren't on my other list. So just so you know, they would have been very high on this list.
Spoiler.
Okay. Number 2 is the team that I made a video on, the Detroit Lions. Okay.
Whoa.
The Detroit Lions are the second most underrated teams in the NFL that I think a lot of people are going to put them number 4 in the NFC North. They could make the playoff. They could win this division. Honestly, they could.
They could.
I think all 4 of these teams in the NFC North could win the division. Just to put that out there. Looking at their team, their offense really doesn't have any holes on paper. Now, looking at it, I mean, they have Frank Ragnow, Glasgow, Wiggins, Wagner, and Decker on the offensive line. There's a lot of like first-round high draft talent there. I think the Danny Amendola as a slot receiver will be a huge improvement from what they had last year because they didn't really have one as long as he can stay on the field. Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay are a solid 1-2 punch. Matthew Stafford, I think, will play a lot better this year in his second year, understanding what Matt Patricia wants to see out of him. And I think that getting Darrell Bevell, as much as I've kind of been a critic of his in the past, I think he's going to improve their running attack with Kerryon Johnson, and they're going to run the ball a lot. I think that's also a reason why they brought in TJ Hawkinson. So then defensively, I've talked about their defensive line. I think it's the most underrated in the NFL. I think they're going to be one of the best teams against the run. And they added Trey Flowers to their pass rush. Deshaun Hand, Ashawn Robinson, these guys are extremely underrated. Linebackers are very fast and athletic, and I think they'll kind of do well in the Matt Patricia kind of blitz scheme. I think Gerard Davis will take a huge step up. And then in the secondary, we know about Darius Slay. I am a believer in Justin Coleman as a slot corner. I'm a little bit questioning about their safeties. But I think this is a team overall that if Matt Patricia can get them to buy in the second season, I think they can be a very good team. And really, when you look at it, it was their offense that disappointed last year, not their defense. Their defense was a top 12 defense last year in terms of statistics. Their offense was in the bottom of the league. So if their offense can get back to where it was a couple seasons ago, this team can definitely be around the 9 to 10 mark.
All right, a lot of Lions love, considering all the stuff that we said last year, and even Bodo sees that as well. So, okay, I definitely like the points there. We all are agreeing, on the Lions this year for the better. At number 2, I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers. I think this team in the NFC South, I mean, it's a very loaded division, a lot of topics, a lot of characters in the NFC South. And when you look at the Carolina Panthers, you saw what they did last year. They were pretty good in the first half. They had a really good offense. Their receivers were still kind of lacking in certain areas, but their defense was getting it done. Cam Newton was putting up pretty good numbers. And then he got injured and everything just went downhill. That's why they finished the year 7-9. And I think that there's a reason. I think it's just kind of lingering into 2019. I feel like people's perceptions of the end of last year coming into 2019. And I think given their team, I don't think that's very fair to say. Cam Newton, if he's healthy, that is the question. If he's healthy, is still a really good quarterback in this league and a guy that gets pretty much underappreciated. Everybody but Mitch, basically. I think a lot of people need to look at him and be like, okay, this is the guy we're looking at for sure. Christian McCaffrey, I mean, fantastic year, over 100 receiving or 100 receptions, which for a running back is absolutely ridiculous, absolutely ludicrous, but is definitely helping out their offense. And then their defense, I really like some of their guys that they had here. Eric Reed, I was not expecting to have as good of a year as he did last year. Luke Kuechly, obviously one of the best linebackers, if not the best linebacker in the game. They drafted Brian Burns in the first round, which I think is going to help them out as well. Don Terry Poe, Bruce Irvin, a lot of good talent, a lot of things you can build around here, and a team that I just think is getting slept on because of the stigma from last year. So at number 2, I got the Carolina Panthers. All right. We have one last selection here. The number 1 teams for each of us here. Kevo, reveal your number 1.
Well, a couple of years ago, I did a video when I was doing those videos that put this man on the hot seat as one of those guys that I think was in trouble. But again, he's a good coach. And he has found a way to adapt and adjust to the times. And my number 1 team that is underrated is the Baltimore Ravens. I have one of the things, we'll get into this and overrated, but I think a very important stat. They are 30-10 when they face the Cleveland Browns over the years. 30-10. So we'll get into that a little bit later as well. So keep that stat in mind. I just think that they know how to win. They have the experience and they seem to know how to win football games. CJ Mosley is a loss for sure, but I think Earl Thomas just will bring such an interesting dynamic to that defense. I know that they're going to run. I'm concerned about some of their acquisitions in terms of size. There's some things I am concerned about, but I think that people are kind of sleeping on this team because there's some excitement elsewhere in the AFC North, and they're overlooking what the Baltimore Ravens do, and they can win football games. So, yeah, I have number 1, the Baltimore Ravens, as my number 1 team. Did we lose Mitch? Did Mitch get angry with me?
We did. He was so mad you picked the Ravens. He just was like, oh, God, come on. There he goes. What happened, bro?
I exited out by accident.
Okay, interesting. Well, Kevo just finished. Perfect timing. Ravens number 1. I'm a little surprised by that. And he brought up one very specific point, which makes me think he's going to put this other team on the overrated list.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I hope you guys know that. Mitch, number 1. Who do you got?
Does anyone want to guess what team is number 1?
I want to guess the team that I'm thinking, but I also have them at my number 1, so I'm not going to guess that team.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll go.
Okay.
All right.
What are you thinking?
Number 1. Again, I have 2 separate lists: dark horse and underrated. Okay, this is my number 1 underrated team.
Mm-hmm.
The Carolina Panthers. Okay? I have one specific reason, though, and it's not Cam Newton, okay? One specific reason other than Cam Newton.
All right.
They were 6-2 last year when Cam Newton was healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Cam Newton got hurt. Why is there keep going to echo? Fuck. After that point, they lost to the Steelers 52-21 in a game where Cam Newton got hurt. Okay. After that point, they lost 5 games in a row by under a touchdown. So if Cam Newton is healthy in those games, how many of those games do they win? Like, just look at their schedule, right? He couldn't throw. He said, and we saw, he couldn't throw over 20 yards. He couldn't push the ball down the field, and that significantly hurt their offense. So just looking at it, they lost the Lions by 1 point. They lost the Seahawks by 3. They lost to the Bucks by 7. They lost to the Browns by 6. They lost to the Saints by 3. And then they lost to Atlanta by 14 in a game I don't think Cam played in. And then they beat the Saints by like 20 the last game of the year. So if Cam Newton is healthy on a team that I think got better in the offseason, what happens last year? And a big reason why I like them as an underrated team, their offensive line is maybe the best one Cam's ever had on paper. They have their second team all-pro right tackle back, Darrell Williams. They have Trey Turner back, who's a very good player. Matt Paradis is one of the best centers in the league, and they got him from the Broncos. Taylor Moton's a very solid left tackle. Their receiving core is young but getting better. This is the second year for DJ Moore. This is going to be the third year for Curtis Samuel, basically the second year because he was hurt in his first year. So those guys should have breakout seasons. I think Chris Hogan, adding him to the mix will help that maturity of those players. They added Brian Burns to the pass rush. They added Bruce Irvin to the pass rush. They have solid D tackles. We know about Luke Kuechly. Shaq Thompson's a good player. Eric Reed was a great add for them late last season, and their secondary is growing up as well. So this is a team, if Cam Newton is healthy, and Greg Olsen hopefully can stay on the field because he was hurt a lot last year too. If Cam Newton is healthy, we know how dynamic he can be. We know how dynamic this offense can be. They have a lot of playmakers who can do things with the ball in their hands, from DJ Moore to Christian McCaffrey to Curtis Samuel. I'm very intrigued to see this team, and I could see the Panthers not only making the playoffs, but possibly winning the NFC South in 2019.
You want to also point out that Gerald McCoy's limited Carolina as one of his last 3 teams here. So
maybe, yeah.
Even if he adds them, that's even more of a reason why they could be underrated. I don't know. My number 1 team is going to be somebody's going to celebrate it. One person in the comments is going to be all over this pick. Okay, they will be loving it for years. Okay,
I already know what team.
My number 1 most underrated team in the league, the Atlanta Falcons. Yes, Ultra, there you go. You get the win. I think the Atlanta Falcons are underrated again because this team last year, when we were coming into it, it's like, okay, we saw the digression of the offense from Super Bowl 51 coming into the next year. I mean, their offense was very limited in what they could do because of their offensive play calling. And then last year, they came in, bunch of injuries right off the gate. I mean, just bam, bam, bam. All these defensive guys that we really like. I mean, one week, boom, here goes one guy. Boom, here goes another guy. Boom. And I think the stigma, just like the Panthers, is coming into this year. We're not talking about how good this team can actually be. You still got Matt Ryan, who honestly almost put up his MVP numbers from 2016. It's basically the same number.
Honestly, I think Matt Ryan had his best season ever last year.
Like, there could be an argument. Like, he was really
put up those numbers without Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without a running back.
Yeah, exactly. Devontae Freeman was out for most of the year.
Yeah, he had Steve Sarkisian, and he had Ito Smith as his best running back.
For most of the year, yeah.
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he was very limited in terms of what he had to help him out here. Julio Jones didn't even get a touchdown to week 10? Like, it was very late in the year, and he was still able to put up good numbers. Of course, we know the talent of Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu. Calvin Ridley came in year last year in his rookie year, had a pretty good first year. We'll see what he does in the second year. They upgraded their offensive line, which was something we wanted to see. They got 2 first-round picks and used them both on offensive linemen, right guard and right tackle. So I think that's a big improvement. That's going to help out Matt Ryan. And then their defense. I mean, you look at what they have here. And again, with all these guys healthy, it's really solid talent. Keanu Neal, one of my favorite free safeties in the game. Ricardo Allen is a great talent as well. Tat McKinley. I won't mention Vic Beasley because we don't like him. Desmond Trufant, I think, is obviously a great cornerback. So Deion Jones, I don't know if I brought him up there, but Deion Jones, one of the best middle linebackers in the game for me. Just a lot of really good talent that's coming back this year, healthy, and with now better talent. Dirk Cutter is now the new offensive coordinator, which we don't think he was even a good head coach, but as an offensive coordinator, it's a different story. So we'll see how it goes. But honestly, I think this team just had that negative stigma from last year pulling into this year, and I don't think a lot of people are talking about them. So that's why they're my number 1 most underrated team.
I'm still concerned about that defense. I'm just that's the one thing that would hold me back of right now. If I had to pick between the Falcons and the Panthers, I think is more complete. I might argue the Panthers are better right now.
I think it's a very close comparison. I think, you know what I mean. Like, if it's just one step above, and it's also because their division is pretty difficult every year, so they get linked together. But I can see your point, definitely. As Ultra tells everybody to go follow my Twitter. Yes, you can follow me and everybody else here. Okay, so that is our underrated list for the guys watching solo. Like, comment who you think your top 5 underrated teams are as well, and subscribe to the channel.